Hi, my name is Dana Caves. I'm a registered dietitian and I work at Smithville Medical Center Family Health Team. I've partnered up with West Lincoln Public Library in Smithville to answer some questions that have been put forward to us from the community. So today's question comes from a West Lincoln Library user, and the question is, my son was recently diagnosed with ADHD. I've been doing a lot of reading about how to make the disorder more manageable with diet and was hoping you could offer some guidance. Thank you. So, good question. There is a lot of issues that can come about with children with ADHD and feeding. So, the top three things I'd want to focus on today regarding children with ADHD. The first point I want to talk about is some studies that have found that children with ADHD, and this is the key thing is to know it's some studies, it's not a whole bunch of studies. We have some limited evidence to say that kids with ADHD have been found to have low levels of circulating omega-3 in their bloodstream. So what does this mean? What are omega-3s? So omega-3s are a healthy fat that we will find in our foods, things like our fish, our shellfish. We also will find it in non-animal food sources such as our flaxseed, our chia seeds, things like that will have good levels there, flaxseed oil. And so what we want to try to do for kids with ADHD is we'd want to make sure that they're getting more of these kind of foods in their diet, especially if there are some studies that indicating that they have lower levels. So, I do encounter this often where parents will say, my kid won't eat that, so what I try to encourage parents to do is to take one step at a time. So something like ground flaxseed is actually a really easy one that you could incorporate into anything that you were baking at home. So I commonly would use it in foods like if I was making homemade pancakes, I put some ground flaxseed in there. So if you're any recipe that you're doing that would have flour in it, I would swap out some of the flour and I would add in some of the ground flaxseed. Another thing you could try doing is incorporating some fish meals, one night a week or something like that. So something that really goes over really well in my family is fish tacos. Super easy to do. It cooks up really fast. And we like to top it with, chopped up pieces of fruit, like maybe some pineapple or mango, maybe make a mango salsa if you want to get experimental. But that's a great thing to try to incorporate into a child's diet. In terms of the evidence with supplements, there is not a lot of good evidence behind taking the supplements and instead trying to get it in the diet. But that's something that you could potentially discuss with your doctor to see if they do recommend that for your child if you can't get any sources of omega-3s in their diet. So then the second point, in terms of children with ADHD and what has been found with the diet, is that it looks to be that kids with ADHD have lower levels of iron, zinc, and magnesium found in their bloodstream. Again, this is limited studies. There are some studies that are finding this, but we need more evidence behind this. However, it's still been that the Dietitians of Canada are recommending that you could get your children's levels tested for those. So you can have your iron status, your zinc, and your magnesium checked. That's something your doctor could order. The big thing to kind of understand is that if a child is low in iron, it also can impact their appetite. So it's kind of one of those catch-22s where you see a lot of children with ADHD have maybe some issues with their appetite, which could be potentially medication related. They're not quite sure about that. So that's point number three, is that kids on ADHD medications, for some of them, it can quiet their appetite so that they're not very hungry. And iron deficiency can do the same thing with children. So it would be a good idea to find out, is it related to the medication or is it related to my child having iron deficiency? Diet sources of iron, zinc, and magnesium so that you can try to encourage your kid to eat more of those things. So iron sources come from our two different types. There's heme iron, which come from our animal products, and then there's a non-heme iron, which come from our plant-based foods. So we absorb the heme iron the best in our body, but it's not to say that we don't absorb the non-heme. We just can do little sneaky things to get us to absorb the non-heme iron a little bit better. So the heme iron sources, any animal sources, so cow, pig, chicken, turkey, fish, shellfish, eggs. Other thing that I use is iron fortified baby cereals because they are increased iron fortification, and I will use that when I'm baking some of my homemade recipes. So again, back to the pancakes, I would take some of the flour out and I put some baby oat cereal in so that it's more iron being put in there. Yeah, so I mean, other things that you could try doing to get your kids to eat iron if they won't eat those things, the plant-based versions of those. So legumes like black beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, hummus, toasted pumpkin seeds are a good source of non-heme iron. And whenever we have those kinds of iron, any kinds of iron, to be honest, if we pair it with something that has vitamin C, it will help you absorb the iron out of the food. So if I have, say, my toasted pumpkin seeds with some slices of apple or some slices of oranges or some strawberries, those all contain sources of vitamin C that will help them absorb the iron out of the toasted pumpkin seeds. So those are little examples there. And as for zinc, the sources of zinc also come from very similar sources. So again, seafood, lobster, crab, any sorts of meats, eggs. It also can be found in dairy products, whereas iron, it's a common misconception that there's iron in dairy products. There are no iron in dairy products, whereas dairy products will contain some zinc. Again, the pumpkin seeds, there's another source of iron that you get from your pumpkin seeds. Tofu and legumes, like our dried beans, peas, and lentils, like the black beans, kidney beans, things like that. And then in terms of magnesium sources in our diet, again, the legumes are excellent sources, but so are nuts, seeds, and fish. So good idea to try to get more of that in there is incorporating nuts and seeds at home. Seeds are also school safe, whereas the tree nuts aren't and the peanuts aren't. So you can try doing, again, the pumpkin seeds are a great source that I send my kids to school with, as it makes a good little easily transportable, shelf stable snack that they can have at school. And then lastly, if the child is struggling with their appetite, so say, you're finding that during the daytime they have low levels of appetite, really important to them to be encouraging to have smaller bits more frequently when they're home. So, something to try to encourage is, keeping things available and trying to encourage a little more often during the day when the medications are on board and they're struggling with their appetite, and making sure that they're not filling up on um, foods that don't provide them as much nutrition. So, I call them my sometimes foods, but foods that might be high in sugar or high in salt or high in saturated or trans fats. So things like, cakes, cookies, candy, sweets, treats, stuff like that. Those are foods that displace the space in their tummies to make sure that they're getting the nutritious foods that they need so they can get their iron and their zinc and their magnesium and their omega-3s. So, it's really important to kind of try to make sure that they're not making that the main bulk of their diet, because it's really going to put them at further risk for nutritional deficiencies. So I hope that's helped answer your question today. And again, if there's ever any future questions, I would strongly encourage you to seek out a dietitian in your community. Myself, if you are able to come see me, would be one example. But anybody in the community that's a dietitian will be able to help you with any further questions. Good luck.